was walking in, I was thinking about Rick, I was thinking about my guests and projects that are going on with work, and then I realized that my zipper was down, and so that was a key win to start this thing off. No reflection on Rick ever, that was just a side note. So Rick George is a longtime friend of this Rotary Club. He may not know this, but April 11th, 2014, just after he was hired, I introduced him here to this club. And we were talking about the spring, we were talking about hope. There was a lot of stuff that I'm sure he wanted to do, and we were speculating all on that. So that was over 10 years ago. In that time, Rick has revitalized the facilities of CU to make it state-of-the-art. He has balanced the budget, probably a really hard thing, but I remember that was kind of controversial. There were some hard decisions that he had to make regarding that. One of his focuses early on was to drive revenue on non-game days, and he's been doing that. But he probably goes down as the guy that brought Prime here. For better, for worse, he may say that it was a team effort, but net, he brought Prime here. And here's one thing I do want to talk about quickly about Rick, and you guys can research him as well. Most people, half the people, they don't show up. Rick does. Those who show up, they watch. Very few of them watch. And very few of those actually see, and those that see actually can see past that in terms of what it should be, and the very few of those can make a plan and execute on that plan to what should exist. And I think that it was what Rick has done here. He has taken some major cuts at coaching candidates that other programs either didn't see or wouldn't be willing to roll the dice on. And I think this entire Rotary Club here has benefited from that. So with that, maybe we can all stand, show Rick that we are shoulder to shoulder with him on this, and welcome Rick George to the stage.
Thank you. I have my phone up here because I was told that I'm on a very specific timeline. So, and you guys started this at 12:36, so I'm actually 2 minutes early. So, just want to thank all of you for having me, Chris, Marty, for inviting me to speak with all of you and share some of my thoughts on some things that are going on in our industry and our business. Because there's a lot going on, but also want to kind of reflect back and just on this past couple years, just to give you some anecdotes about the impact that CU Athletics is having on this community. It's been a really exciting year for us. For the 7th consecutive semester in a row, our student athletes have bested the student body's average GPA, which is something I'm really proud of. We actually, for the first time in our history, had every team with over a 3.0 GPA, which is something that I'm really excited about. We've had some really good success in our athletic programs. We all know about the football team going 9-3, going to a bowl game for the first time in 4 years, and just the second time since 2016. Our women's soccer team continues, and our women's sports really have been leading the charge. They've really done an amazing job at our university, so yes. But our women's soccer team reached the NCAA tournament for the second time in a row. Women's basketball, 2 Sweet 16 tournaments, appearances in a row. Our ski team is doing phenomenal, winning the national championship last year. I got to see it, and one of the great things about it is there's a bar at the bottom of the hill. So on Friday night, under the lights, you can go have a drink while you watch. So you should come up to Steamboat next time we're there, but it was a heck of a time. We really enjoyed that. And then our men's golf team's off to a great start, and we have high expectations for our teams this spring. Our tennis coach, Anthony Pham's doing an unbelievable job with that program. I think we've lost 1 match so far, and he's doing that, practicing in the Balch Fieldhouse. We put 3 courts down. We're partnering with the Meadows to have some indoor events there. So it's been a really good year for us at this point. Men's basketball obviously is not having the kind of year that TAD typically has, but I'm confident in where that program's headed, and JR's had some struggles with injuries for our women's basketball team, but I still think we have a shot to go to our 3rd Sweet 16 in a row. Of course, We got to talk about Coach Prime and our football program and what they've brought to this community, and it's really unprecedented exposure. Every one of our football games this past season, we were featured on the 4 major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, on their main channels, and on ESPN on their main channel. We were never on a secondary channel, which no other school in the country, including Alabama or Ohio State, were on all of those networks that we were. So it's unprecedented. We're literally the most watched program in the country. We finished 6th overall. Over 50 million viewers that viewed our broadcast this past year. Our Alamo Bowl game had 8 million viewers, which was the highest that they've had in their history, and it was the highest non-New Year's Six or CFP bowl game in the last 5 years. So we're really excited about that kind of media exposure, the television viewership, the big noon kickoffs that we've had, the fact that we're constantly on national news. It's the equivalent of $389 million of advertising for this community, for our university and our program. So again, it brings a lot of eyeballs on what we're doing. From the economic side of it, we are an engine for tourism in Boulder and the Front Range. Over the last 3 years, CU athletic events, and this does not include our concerts that we put on, we've generated nearly $1 billion in economic impact to the state over the last 3 years. And it took us 5 years to do that previous to that. So again, something else that we're really proud of, the direct visitor spending in the Boulder community increased $10 million last year alone. And the average amount spent per visitor on accommodations, because you know they charge triple the price on the weekends for you that have guests that come in. So you should do that. If they're staying at your house, just charge them 3 times as much. But it went from $102 to $183. You know, again, this is just football, but if you take the concerts, and we're going to do more, you just saw we announced the Fish concert. That concert business has a direct economic impact of about $31 million per year. Of the 20% of those attending our football games come from out of state. And the 2 biggest states that they come from are Florida and Virginia, which we have not had a footprint in as a university. Usually it's Dallas, Chicago, and of course the West Coast. But people are coming here for the first time and viewing our community and our city and our athletic department. We've also, the exposure, we're not going to take credit for the growth in applications, but I will. Sorry, I had to say that. And Glenn, is here, one of our faculty members and a great friend of athletics. But it's been really important for our university. Applications to attend CU Boulder increased 20% from a year ago to over 67,000 applications, including an 18% increase in applications from out of state. Out-of-state applications exceeded 50,000 people, and the applications from prospective student athletes who identify as Black African American increased 50.5%. So that's something that we're really proud of. Enrollment at CU is at a record high. There's 38,000 students. 90% of the students that attended last fall have been retained, so they came back, which is another really important thing for our university to have. We've just had incredible numbers from the exposure that we've driven into this community. And I do have to tell you, though, but we're at a crossroads right now. We've had this great success, and the university and the community, I think, has enjoyed tremendous success. But with this new case that we have, and if you haven't heard of it, it's called the House Settlement Case. And essentially, it's a class action suit against the NCAA and the Power Four conferences. And it's really about their NIL rights. And so there's 2 pieces to this settlement. The first piece of the settlement is back damages. And that was about $1.8 billion. And that is going to be funded mostly, and it's for a class that was 10 years prior to 2025, which is where we are now. So the 2024 season. So it's back damages for that. That'll be paid over the next 10 years. The NCAA is footing most of that bill, but it will impact us because they'll take $1 million out of the distributions that we normally get from the NCAA. But this is seismic for our industry and for our for what we're doing. I think part of this, it's all about NIL, name, image, and likeness. As I mentioned, student athletes being able to monetize their individual brands. The transfer portal has put, and if you're not aware of the transfer portal, if you go into the transfer portal, it used to be you had to sit out a year, which was great for them to be able to get the credits that they need to get their degrees at that institution. Now you can transfer as often as you want, whenever you want, and a lot of it comes down to who's got the biggest bag and how's that going to be applied. I think one of the great things about the House case, and again, the judge is going to rule on it finally on April 7th, but it's changed. It's gone back and forth for several months. We've been working on this as a department for the last 7 months on how we're going to do this. But basically, the forward-facing damages come to 22% of the revenue that the Power 4 schools generate. So if you think about an Alabama or Ohio State or Michigan that generates $200 million in expenses each year, we're at $134 million. We're all paying the same thing, but it equates to a $20.5 million cap on revenue share that we can provide to our student athletes to buy their name, image, and likeness rights. Those will be exclusive and non-exclusive deals that we will create with our student athletes. And it'll be very similar to, okay, you got a financial aid. Here's your financial aid. You're going to get a full scholarship, tuition fees, benefits. We're going to provide you these incredible benefits, which I'm very proud of what we do under the Crawford family, whole student athletes, the mental health support that we give them, nutrition, academics, leadership and career, psychological health performance. We've got 4 full-time clinicians there that do a phenomenal job. It won't impact that, but it's going to have a tremendous impact on what we do and how we do this moving forward, because you can't just find $20.5 million overnight. Fortunately, we've had about 7 months to look at that. And again, in addition to the settlement, the student athletes are still able to go above the cap. So there's a cap of $20.5 million that we can share with our student athletes. And if you don't share $20.5 million in revenue with your student athletes, you're going to get left behind. And so we have to do this if we're going to get in that next tranche of realignment, which will happen in the next 5 to 7 years. And if you're going to be in that tranche, you're going to have great viewership numbers. You're going to have great support for your student athletes. All of this really matters today. So as we're looking at this, we're planning for this year, but we're also planning for the next 5 to 7 years, because in 5 to 7 years, somebody else will be up here talking to you about that, not me. But that'll be a real challenge. And for us to be considered in that, we have to be one of the top 50 schools in the country. And that's our focus. So we talked about back pay. They're also part of the settlement is roster limits. And so, and the way it's always worked, from a Title IX perspective, there's 3 categories. One is participation, which is the opportunities you provide your student athlete. We've always been in compliance from Title IX. The scholarships, which is the funding piece of it, you have to be within 1 percentage point of your admissions population from male to female. We've always been in line with that. And then the others, opportunities, and those are the benefits that we provide for them. And so that's an important part of what we're doing. This is not considered at one point, and you talk about planning, at one point, when the previous administration went out, they said this absolutely applies to Title IX. It's part of the financial aid. 10 days ago, we received something from the new administration that said it does not apply to financial aid. And so there's, it just has gone all over the maps. But for us, again, we want to compete at that next level. And so you also have to keep in mind as we're doing this, we're what they call on the campus as an auxiliary unit, which means that we have to raise our own money to support what we do. So we do get some money from the university, and they've been incredibly gracious for us. Like the scoreboard there was part of something that the university helped us do. And they have helped our budget, but we're responsible for our budget. So it's how we generate revenue that's going to allow us to be able to succeed in this. But going back to roster limits, you've probably seen one of our walk-ons is kind of the chair of this walk-on suit or objection that they filed against the House settlement. Because in this, when you have roster limits, just as a quick example, football's had somewhere between 125 to 130 student athletes that start the year. That's a roster limit. You can only provide 85 scholarships for them. Now, their number has gone down to 105, which will make it really challenging. And a lot of our other sports, roster sizes are being reduced. And those have to be in compliance because that's the opportunities piece that you have. They have to be in compliance. And I know this is probably confusing to you because it is to me still, and I've been dealing with it for 8 months. So that's another challenge that we have. And you probably read out there, for some of you that pay close attention, a lot of coaches have complained that they've had to tell student athletes that have been walk-ons that they're no longer going to be able to be on the team starting July 1 when this settlement goes into place. And that is a challenge, but something that I think we can get past. And I think at the end of the day, if football has 105, they've still got 20 walk-ons within that 105. Now, the good thing about this is the scholarships now are no longer just full scholarships. You can make all of your scholarships now what we call equivalency, which is what soccer does and some of our other sports, men's golf, women's golf. They get equivalencies up to a certain number. So our coaches can use those 85 and say, okay, I'm going to give 75 football players a full scholarship, and I'm going to split the next 10 scholarships up amongst the other 20 walk-ons. So there's some real positive in that as well. But again, it's just like the NFL. We met with the Broncos, their GM, their assistant GM, to figure out how they do this from a salary cap perspective to make sure that we had the updated technology that we needed. So I say all that because in order for us to do this, we've got to go out and do two things. One, we've looked really hard over the last 7 months. We've already saved $1.5 million in expenses. We haven't filled positions when people have left, but we have to reduce our expenses. It reminds me a little bit of COVID, where we had to figure out how are we going to do this when we have no ticket revenue, we have really no fundraising revenue, how are we going to do this? And so it's really a similar thing. We're looking at every area of our business. One thing that we won't do is we won't take away the benefits that we provide our student athletes. We're going to make sure that they have the mental health support, that they have the nutrition, they have the academic support, leadership and career. Those will not go away. But we're looking at consolidating departments. We're looking at making some employee cuts at the end of this semester that we have to make to be able to have some savings. And then we've looked at how do we generate more revenue. One of the things that, I don't know that it's public, so if it gets out there, who cares? But we're going to put AstroTurf down instead of grass in Folsom this year. Part of that is it helps us be able to have events, but we're also looking at if we're in the college football playoff and we have to host a game in December, late December in Boulder, you don't grow grass in December. And we're going to be in that playoff, and we want to be able to host it, and we don't want to have to say, well, you got to play it somewhere else because we don't have a field that can accommodate that. So we're looking at doing that. But with these financial demands, it's challenging for us, and we're looking at every way that we can. We've got 3 nights of concert with Fish. We've got 2 or 3 other concerts that we're going to be announcing that we will have this fall. We've got 7 home football games. We're looking at our student athletic fee. We're challenging our donors to give more if you can. And again, a lot of our donors are from California, and we know about the fires there and the impact that that's had on a lot of people. So, for us, my ask to you is if you do have a business, try to get involved in NIL and sponsor one of our young men or women. They're great ambassadors, and with the exposure that we're giving companies a lot of great viewership and great opportunities to engage with customers around the country. We're going to be very competitive. My goal is that we win championships in all of our sports. I think we can do that. In the Big 12, we need football to go to another national championship game. I think we can do that under Coach Prime's leadership. Again, we're trying to set this up for the future. And so I'm going to stop my comments then because I'm 16 minutes and I've got 14 minutes based on the schedule for questions because I'd rather hear your questions and answer those. Is that fair? Thank you. I don't want to take Chris's notes, so I just make sure of that. Questions? Yes, Glenn.
Hi, Rick. So I have some students interning at the state capitol this semester, and they're talking about this piece of legislation that has to go through the state. Can you tell us just a bit about that? It relates to NIL, right?
Yeah. Basically, you're talking about the NIL bill, which is I think it's House Bill 1040 or something like that. 1041. I went down and testified down at the Capitol along with our legal counsel and others. And essentially what we're asking for, because we currently have a bill as it relates to NIL. And in that bill, currently it says you cannot pay student athletes. This bill will allow us, we're asking that we can pay student athletes as part of this revenue share. The second piece of it is we're asking for them for the student athletes contracts to not be subject to the Open Records Act. And the reason we did that and we wanted that, a lot of schools are doing it, is we think it causes a lot of mental issues for our student athletes. If, Marty and I just had this conversation, if you got some of your players that aren't performing and everybody knows they're making $150,000 and just the chatter on social media and all that. We have concerns around that. We want to protect that. We're okay with saying, okay, we'll de-identify the student athletes so they don't know who it is and give, but we don't want to give the exact person's name because it just puts them in some crosshairs of some people that like to be mean and ugly on social media.
Thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
Sure.
I was researching to make your bio slide, and I saw that the 2 highest NIL numbers were for 2 CU players, Shadur and Travis, and I have to imagine that's helping with recruiting. But we're a city of 100,000 people, and you're competing against some very large schools, and I'm wondering how you all were able to accomplish it, and if you could speak a little bit to how engaged the university is with helping the students secure those versus their own representation and coaches.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I'll go to the second one, and we can help them in this new bill moving forward. We can help them. We have an NIL exchange that's on our website that companies can go on there and engage directly with student athlete through this NIL exchange. So we can do that. We're in process of kind of redoing our whole NIL program that we'll have a general manager in. We'll have a company that's out there looking for local and national deals. As it relates to Travis and Shadur, they brought them from their business manager or whatever that they had, and they went out and got the Celsius deal, the United Airlines deal, the number of deals that they had. They got those on their own through their agent, business manager, whoever that was, which is legal. And some of them still may do that moving forward. But as we look at the cap, we've got to figure out a way to pay the $20.5 million, which we will do. And then we've also got, we'll be hiring a group to go out to local businesses to help us find local NIL bills. And you talk about, well, we're only a town of 100,000, but Tuscaloosa, Alabama isn't any bigger than that, and a lot of the schools like Waco, Texas and that, but they do have donors that are in major cities that provide those opportunities, that have companies that provide those opportunities. So the revenue cap is important because it does kind of keep everybody on the same playing field, but it's above the cap stuff that we also have to probably raise somewhere between $3 and $7 million. Or a business that our student athletes can partake in.
Thank you, Rick. I've got two questions. One is semi-serious. It's my question. I also have one that's somewhat under duress, as Cody knows, from somebody who couldn't be here today. The first question is, you mentioned realignment and coming up the road. There's a lot of commentary about NCAA structures and all of the mega conferences and so on. I'd like you to maybe address a little bit where you think all of that's going. Are we headed towards an NFL kind of structure down the road? What's the timing for that and so on, some of the dynamics? The other question.
Well, let's wait. You give me the other question so I don't forget. You know, at my age, I can't remember two things.
Understood.
So that first one, first question is, there is a real realignment that I think is going to happen. And you've probably read that the Big Ten and the SEC just got through meeting. They're not meeting to be nice to each other. They're up to something, right? But we also look at this landscape, and there's two different models out there. One's from a gentleman that has a business that we know that's been in the industry for a while, and then there's another one from a private equity group. And basically, both structures are somewhat similar. And so when I talk about we've got to have the viewership numbers, we've got to have the resource numbers, because to get into those two leagues the way they're structured, it's just what you said. It's like an NFC East and West and an AFC East and West. And they're going to take the top 48 to 64 teams, and they're going to create incredible matchups because that's what the networks want. Let's be honest here. The networks are driving a lot of this, right? And that's where a lot of the money's coming for. But if you look at the value of what those rights would be to put those top teams together, it's significant. Could be double what we're at today. So yes, do I think that's coming? Yes. But the first media rights deal that's coming up is the Big Ten in 2030. So we think around the end of this decade and the early part, because then we go to the market in 2031 as a Big 12, and then the SEC's 32, and the ACC's 36. So we do think that that's a real, it's real. And for us, that's why we're planning today to be ready for that tomorrow, because tomorrow's coming, and that 5 years goes fairly quick.
That's really helpful, and thank you for that. The other question is premised on having had season tickets since 1987, having watched all the growth and development, Dow Ward, Champions Center, several iterations of turf over the years and so on. Why, my correspondent asks, can't we get the stands and the women's bathrooms fixed?
Well, I will tell you why. We're going to. Thanks for that. You asked two really good questions, but the last one I don't like so much because I get it all the time on emails, and it's really nicer, not as nice as you just were. But we intend to fix those. That will be the next project on the horizon. And we've been meeting with our regents, we've been meeting with our president and chancellor to talk about those plans. We have a great plan in place, and it's really mostly going to be focused on the west side, Balch Fieldhouse, and what does that look like. We'll look at the other rooms when we're doing that construction. We'll do that because it'll be a 2-year build for us to be able to do that. But we have a great design in place. We know exactly what we want to do. We know exactly how we're going to drive revenue. We're going to create a club that the community can come into and during the course of the week. So we've got a big plan for that. But we'll fix all that in the next 3 to 5 years. I'd like to get it started before I leave.
So, Rick, I want to just ask, without you divulging any kind of personal confidences or whatever, what caused you to think that you could hire Coach Prime, and what went into that thought process?
Oh, that's gosh darn, you guys are tough. But I love it. I got 6 minutes, so I'll try to be quick so I can take 1 or 2 more. But look, whenever we look to hire a coach, we've got 4 different pools. One is a sitting Power 5 coach. One is a sitting Group of 5 HBCU coach. And then the other are the offensive and defensive coordinators at a Power 5 institution. So, and I've got this on my desk in lock and key in my office. But when we went to this second hire, every one of them was different. When we hired Mel Tucker, we needed somebody that provided some discipline and some toughness to the program that we felt. And when he left after a year and we hired Carl Durrell, we wanted somebody that would bring stability. This last one, we had to get it right. And if we didn't get it right, our program was going in the wrong direction for a number of years. And a lot of that's my fault, and I'll take responsibility for that. But a lot of people didn't go after Coach Prime. We did because, and look, again, like everything else, until you really know what you know, you don't know. And when I went into his home on a Sunday night in Canton, Mississippi, in the middle of nowhere, that's what he likes, I went and visited with him, and I said, he was watching the Cowboys-Packer game, and when that got over, he and I started talking. I said, do you want to go first? Do you want me to? I went first. I showed him all the stuff, the highlights, and the drone show of our stadium and all that. Told him all the bad things and the good things, and then he presented. And I still have this book in my office. There's only 2 of them, and he laid it out and said, here's exactly what I'm going to do. And in that book, he evaluated every single student athlete on our team. And so when he came into that first meeting and said, a lot of you aren't going to be here, he knew because he did his homework. And then the coaches, there's 10 full-time coaches, he got 9 of the 10 right that said they would come with me. One of them was the sitting head coach at Kent State, who's now the head coach at San Diego State. So when I left his house, and it was just me, because I usually do those by myself, when I left his house, I called a couple of my colleagues at the office and said, I'm going to hire this guy. And so we move on, and then the very next week I met with his business manager out in LA on my way up to Seattle for our game. On that Saturday, there was a lot of commotion out there about Deion going to Nebraska, and it was when Ole Miss said Lane Kiffin's going to Auburn, and so I called his agent that day before we played and said, okay, I'm just going to up the ante $500,000. So the next Tuesday, I'm at the airport. I'm on the college football selection committee, which I had to do 6 weeks in a row. I was getting ready to jump on the plane back here from Dallas at gate E7, and he calls on the phone, his business partner does, says, Deion wants to talk to you. I'm like, oh, I'm sure he's going to throw me in the street. He said, I'm coming. And that's where we coming came from. Then he said, we coming, and he was at lunch with Coach Hart. And again, when I came out of that home, you can see, all the showy stuff that you see with all the flash and pomp and circumstance. But behind all that is a guy that's genuinely got great character, that cares about young men, wants to develop them. And when I walked out of that house, I said, he's got to be the guy. And we were able to get him. So, all right, I got 2 minutes. Any last question?
We have time for one more question.
One more question. Oh, this better be a good one.
Oh boy, the pressure. So everything going on with NIL, transfer portal, realignment, what's going on with the student athletes? What would you say are the benefits and detriments with everything going on to their mental health, for their ability to achieve in the classroom, for us preparing these young men and women to have careers and be successful parents and community members? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what you feel is going on with the student athletes?
Yeah, look, I would tell you that we provide incredible benefits to our student athletes. I think what we provide our student athletes from a mental health perspective, from academic support, from leadership, from nutrition, we do it better than anybody. We really do. And so I think they've got a strong base. We're basically talking about a very small subset of our student athletes that are really impacted by this in a big way. Yes, there's a lot of people that transfer. There's some grad transfers that come in and get their degree. Our graduation rates are still incredibly high. I have concerns about that moving forward. I really do, because I think if you're going to transfer 5 times, how are you going to have progress towards degree credits that you need at that receiving institution? So I do have concerns about that. I just spoke at an award ceremony on Friday night in Las Vegas, and I said we can't lose sight of what our mission is. And our mission is that we've got to get these young men and women to graduate, get a meaningful degree where they can become great citizens of the community that they live in. We can't lose sight of that. And that's where we're going to need some help from the federal government. We've been working on this for 18 months to try to get some kind of limited antitrust exemption so we can enforce our rules and be able to move forward with that. But it's an incredible concern that I have. But I see our student athletes every day. I work out in the same gym they do around lunchtime. I go by the chow hall where they all eat together. All of our student athletes eat together. That's something that most universities don't do, but all of ours do. We think we've created a great culture there, and that's why we don't have a lot that transfer. But in this world of football and men's and women's basketball in particular, that's the biggest concern I have, because those three sports are the ones that are going to have the most money to be able to compensate student athletes. So, but I think generally we're in a really good spot because we've got a great culture and our student. How would you not want to live in this community? It's beautiful, and we came back here a second time for a reason. So I know I have to go, but I really appreciate, yes, sir.
One last thing.
Yes, sir.
So we thank you very much for coming. Thank you for everything that you do. I can see that your job is a lot tougher than mine.
I just want to make sure I'm on time here.
Yeah. One of the
Marty
reasons
told me, you got to go.
you'll be out of here in 30 seconds.
No,
One of the reasons I joined this place is some of our work, and some of our work in polio in particular. When I was a kid, they didn't even call it polio. It was infantile paralysis, and some of my neighbors died. So Boulder Rotary's been working on polio for about 35 years, and with Bill Gates, and it's almost over. Almost. We're very, very close, but we still need a lot more money, and we're working on it. And this club is very, very generous about that. So in your honor, and to thank you for coming, we'd like to donate 100 doses of the vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund in your name.